So in my previous video, I went over a pretty massive change that was recently added to retail WoW, in that all Dragonflight dungeons and raids are now in legacy loot mode, meaning some of the fights and things have been changed so you can easily solo them instead of not being able to solo them like previously. But the much more important change is that now if you go to, say, a Dragonflight raid and complete it on mythic difficulty, you will now get every piece of loot that would normally drop if you were doing it in an actual 20-man raid. Until an expansion is in legacy loot mode and you go solo, say, a raid boss, it'll only drop you maybe one item if you actually get a drop. But now that Dragonflight's in legacy loot mode, you go kill a boss, any drop that would have dropped for the entirety of the group, you now get as drops. So you go do, say, a dungeon boss, it'll drop you multiple items. You do a raid boss, depending on the difficulty or size of the raid, you'll get like 5+ items. And this will completely change how you farm Transmog and other items from these dungeons and raids. And also in my previous video, I went over one of the most interesting farms from Dragonflight now, which is the Dawn of the Infinite Mega Dungeon. I would very much recommend going and checking out that previous video. I went over a lot of things that you may need to know for this video. Now, the main thing I want to go over in this video that builds upon that last video is that there is a way to very easily farm the final boss of the Dawn of the Infinite Mega Dungeon to farm one of the most important items I went over in that previous video, and that's quantum items. So if you go complete the Dawn of the Infinite Mega Dungeon on mythic difficulty, there are a few different types of these quantum items that can drop. The first one being the Quantum Corsair, which will give you 1 out of 17 pretty rare mounts that you don't already have, but it can only give those 17 mounts. But again, a bunch of them are very rare mounts from raids or other things, like some of the Zul'Gurub mounts or some of the other super rare mounts from other raids or dungeons. And this is a much more rare drop item. It's like a 2% drop rate. So this isn't the main thing we're farming for, but if you don't have these rare mounts and you do the farm we go over in this video, you'll probably pick these up over time to give you some additional rare mounts, which is kind of a side benefit of doing this. But the main thing you're really after is these quantum items that have a 100% drop chance when you defeat this boss on mythic. And there is a quantum item for every armor piece, and then there is a quantum item for every weapon type in the game. And what quantum items do is when you learn them, they will give you a transmog appearance you don't already know. And this isn't just appearances you don't already know from like the dungeon or from Dragonflight. This can be things from any point in the game's history. And in fact, this can be things that are no longer obtainable. This can be super rare things like the Arcanite Ripper. This can be things from the black market auction house that you can only get from there. This can be old PvP sets. I don't think it can be PvP sets that require the higher rating, but it can still be pretty much every other PvP item. It can be items that are no longer obtainable that were from expansion pre-patch events. It can even give you item IDs that were never obtainable in the game that share appearances with other items. So if you're someone that just likes collecting everything, you may really be into this. It can also just give you some of the rarest items in the game's history. And a lot of this information does come from Wowhead comments, where when this dungeon was first coming out, someone did a bunch of testing on the PTR. And one of the things they specifically got was the Pendulum of Doom, which if you've never heard of, that makes sense because it's possibly the rarest item in the game right now that is still obtainable. But this is just a low-level blue item that's one of the rarest drop items in the game, that if you're a collector, you probably want this, but the average price of this on US realms right now is like 4.5 to 5 million gold because it's just that rare. And that again is another item you can obtain. So the vast majority of items that have ever been obtainable in the game, you can get from these quantum items. Now there's some things you can't get, like you can't get like old Nax items, so you can't go and get a corrupted Ashbringer or something. A vast majority of items in the game's history you can actually get from these quantum items, and you can farm this pretty easily using this method. Now the first thing you're going to need to do for this farm is to go on your most highly geared character and get into a DPS spec, because you're going to want to go and complete 7 of the 8 bosses of Dawn of the Infinite. Now you don't really need a super high geared character to do this dungeon. There's only one boss that can give you some trouble because you either need to be able to heal an NPC very quickly or just DPS this boss down. And if you have a super undergood character, you may need to go gear them up a little bit. But if you go get the pre-patch gear that's all 121 item level, you could pretty easily do the entirety of this dungeon without difficulties. But just going on your most geared character will save you some time. So you're going to go in this dungeon and complete 7 of the 8 bosses. You are not going to kill the final boss because you're going to use this dungeon lockout for all of your other characters. Because keep in mind, you're doing this on mythic difficulty, meaning you can only do it once a week per character. So doing this 7 out of 8 run is going to allow you to share that lockout with all of your ults, and it's actually pretty easy. So after you've completed 7 of the 8 bosses, you're going to then hearth to a city and log off that main. You're then going to go on the first ult you want to defeat the last boss on, and you're going to go to the Dawn of the Infinite entrance on that new ult. This is just to make it a bit easy because you can kind of mess this up if you're not quick enough. Then log off that ult, log back onto that main character that you have the lockout on. You're going to then create a group in the group finder. Make sure you remember the name of that group because you're going to be joining it on that ult that is now at the entrance to Dawn of the Infinite. So you create that group, then log off that main character again, log back on that alt character, then request to join the group of your main. Then you're going to do it again. Log off your alt, log back onto your main, and accept the invite of your alt. So now you're going to have the main character with the lockout sitting in a city who is the leader of the group, and now your alt will also be in that group. So then you're going to log off that main, log back on the alt, you're going to enter the Dawn of the Infinite dungeon, and then make your way to the final boss of the dungeon. Now, while you're making your way to the final boss of this dungeon, because remember, you will be on the 7 of 8 lockout, your main will be logged out long enough for you to get leader of this group. So after you get leader, you are going to uninvite your main character from the group. Don't leave your group or disband your group because that will just kick you out of the dungeon at some point. Just uninvite your main character. It will ask you to relist your group. Just click the edit group button and then exit out of it, and you'll still be in the group with the lockout on your alt, and your main that has the lockout will no longer be in the group. At this point, you can go defeat the final boss of the dungeon, which will give you a guaranteed quantum item, may give you a quantum corsair, and while that alt you just defeated the boss on will be 8 out of 8 lockout for the rest of that week, your main character that has the 7 of 8 lockout will not have the 8 of 8 lockout. They will still have 7 of 8. So once you know how to do this pretty easily, you can go rinse and repeat do this on every single character on your account. And because the final boss of Dawn of the Infinite doesn't have like any pass or fail mechanics or anything that can really wipe you, even on very lesser geared characters, you can pretty easily go do this. I've been doing this on a bunch of characters that are freshly transferred from Legion Remix, so they only have 102 item level. You can still do the final boss of this dungeon with that 102 item level, and it's still generally pretty easy. You may have to use a few defensives throughout the fight, but it's generally pretty easy. So you're just going to be doing that, rinse and repeating the method I just went over, and you can just farm the final boss of this dungeon on as many characters as you want, primarily for farming those quantum items, but also for secondarily farming the quantum corsair, which can give you some pretty rare amounts. Also, keep in mind these quantum items are warband equipped, so you can put them on your warband bank, and this is specifically if you're trying to get different armor pieces outside of the character you're currently doing it on. So let's say you primarily play a cloth user, so you're trying to get more cloth transmogs, and you're going through and doing this on all of your characters, and they're getting quantum armor pieces. Just put those in your warband bank and use them on a cloth character, because specifically for the armor pieces, whatever armor type that character uses when you use the quantum item, if you use the quantum armor item on a plate user, it'll give you plate. Use it on a cloth user, it'll give you cloth. That's really the only thing you have to worry about when using these quantum items. And that's all you're going to be doing to do this farm. You can actually farm this very quickly using this method, and you'll just be getting so many of these quantum items because you can do it so quickly that this is legitimately one of the better transmog farms in the game. Now, you can get unlucky and just get a bunch of like random stuff that you don't really want, but again, you can get pretty lucky and just get unobtainable items, black market auction house items, PvP items. You can get some of the rarest random items in the game. So there's just so much cool stuff you can get, and it's kind of like endgame gambling because it's just randomly giving you an item of that category, so you can legitimately get the worst looking item that you don't care about or some of the coolest transmogs in the game. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.